Well, we've talked a lot about the school shooting that we had yesterday, immigration, student aid, but we haven't really talked a whole lot about the economy. Let's spend a second and talk about things that are affecting your money, namely the tariffs. My next guest is going to give me an assist with that. Meet Derrick Barker. He is the CEO and founder of Nectar. But since this is your first time on the show, Derrick, a little bit of your background. You have a nice little backstory here. Give me the 30-second rundown on why we should talk to you about how tariffs are impacting real estate.
Sure. I've been in real estate and finance my whole career. I started buying real estate when I was really a senior at Harvard College. It was right after we were coming out of the great financial crisis. Started with single family, ended up working at Goldman Sachs as a bond trader after college. We built a 500-unit portfolio while I was there. Then left full-time, began building a portfolio, ended up buying, renovating, selling, developing, asset managing over $500 billion worth of real estate, mostly apartments. And now I run Nectar, and we finance apartment complexes all throughout the country.
Yeah, so like a sort of a mini Donald Trump there, but you went more to the finance side as of late. Now, how has Nectar and your business been affected by the tariffs thus far?
I'd say Nectar's business is pretty unique in that we only we own and invest in stabilized, low-leverage, cash-flowing assets with permanent debt.
We're talking with a bunch of regular people here. Say that in regular English.
Okay, that's a good point. So we have apartment complexes that are already well-occupied, so 90 to 100% occupied, that are already, so they're cash-flowing. And the mortgage on our properties, the mortgages are typically pretty low leverage. So let's say 65 or 60% loan to value on the apartments. So in their 10-year, 5 to 10 year terms on the mortgage. So we have a long time before we have to refinance or sell the property.
Okay. So with all that as a setup, we've already heard about people not making moves and waiting until some of this uncertainty settles down. We've also heard about prices going up, whether it's legit, the price of lumber or whatever, or some companies may be using this as an excuse to raise prices. Have y'all seen your activity slow down?
We have not seen our activity slow down specifically, but we have seen changes in the market, definitely. To go a little bit more on that, the number of properties number of projects that can be financed, that make sense financially to buy, renovate, or to build is just down. It's going to be very, very difficult to supply new units or bring new units to market. So that activity is, I'm not going to say 100% gone, but it's just so low. The demand, but that takes a long time to work its way through the economy because it takes a couple of years to go from buying a property to having a fully renovated or built unit on the market. So we're not going to see those impacts for a while. But I will say that demand can move faster in the near term. So this uncertainty, it makes people who they were going to move out with their roommate, get into that studio, and they're like, oh well, why don't I just renew this roommate situation? Or they were going to go from a studio to a 2-bedroom, or move out the house, and get to that new apartment. People are just pausing, and there's a little bit of the slowdown in rental demand. For properties that are already occupied, doesn't make that big of a difference. It's the new properties that are being leased up where that has somewhat of an impact.
So how long do you think this will last? Because a popular strain of thought is this could just be a weird convulsion that happens for weeks, maybe months at the latest, and we won't even be thinking about this a year from now. What do you say, Derrick Barker?
On the demand side, it's just uncertain. I think there's uncertainty in terms of housing demand, people wanting to move into new units. Is not very clear how long. That's going to depend on a lot of factors. On the supply side, though, this is going to have an impact, period. And it's going to be a long-term, meaningful impact because the costs to build are higher. They just are. Like, we are deglobalizing. The tariffs going on and off are a symptom, not the cause of the deglobalization. And the deglobalization is making costs higher, period. So it's going to cost more to make housing. And with all the uncertainty, lenders and investors, they just pull back too. Like, they don't want to cut a check when they are not sure and when there's uncertainty. And so there are projects right now that would be getting built to deliver in 2 years that are just not going to happen. And that's going to, for a long time, people are going to not be building. And that's going to mean that in a couple of years, we're going to really see that there's just not as much, there's not as many apartments on the market, especially for markets that are growing.
All right, but
the population is going up.
Our population is definitely growing here. So, Derrick Barker, there's some people that are listening out of the tens of thousands right now that are considering maybe I should take this extra money I have and get a rental property or buy the house next door and rent it out, or maybe build a house and get into the rental game. And is this an incentive for people who are sort of on the fence? You might want to get into this because it's going to be lucrative.
If you have the capital to get in the game and hold on through any short-term volatility, this is a good time. I'd say we are in a market where there's structural barriers to creating supply, and there's structural reasons that demand is going to keep going up no matter what happens in the short term. So if you can be a part of that supply, then it is the winds of the long-term winds of economics are blowing in your favor.
Well, fantastic. Derrick Barker, CEO of Nectar, I appreciate you being on the James Show, sir.
All right. Thanks for the time. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, and I know there's some people out there thinking about getting in the rental business. I know you're thinking about maybe when you get your next house, just keeping the old house and renting it out, or maybe doing an Airbnb. And there's a lot of reasons to think that could be really smart when you see what the market looks like in a year, maybe 5 years at the most. Listen, people, stop sending me the stories about how the kid and his family are wasting all the money from the defense fund. I'm talking about the stabbing death of Austin Metcalf, the Frisco track meet situation. I'm ecstatic about that. They're like, can you believe that they're renting a $900,000 house and they just bought a $150,000 Escalade? Yeah, I go waste all that money, please. Burn through it as fast as you can. Don't spend it on lawyers. Don't try and keep your own son out of jail for the rest of his life. Please keep making terrible decisions with the money. But listen, stop sending me that. I'm going to do probably a half hour on it on the show tomorrow. So just let me keep my powder dry and finish a couple more things, because I have some people behind the scenes that are looking all this stuff up, and we're working on a great segment for you tomorrow. The other thing I have is an update here on a story that we've been following, because Chris Van Hollen, your congressman from the Maryland area, has been going after the Maryland father. Maryland father. That's how some people are styling him. Other people would style him as a domestic abuser, human trafficker, MS-13, gang member, illegal immigrant from El Salvador. But I do admit that's a lot of adjectives. Maryland father, a lot faster. But Chris Van Hollen, he's so concerned about the well-being of this sort of constituent. I mean, he's not even a legal citizen, but, Maryland is his domain. We were playing for you earlier. He was in the airport. I'm going to El Salvador, trying to get this guy back. And then he was landing in San Salvador. I'm down here in San Salvador, the capital of El Salvador, trying to get this guy back. And so now he had some sort of meeting, and he came out and talked to the press for a little bit. Well, I'll just play you about a minute and a half of this, and you'll get the gist.
Now, the courts of the United States have said there's no evidence to support the charge that he's part of MS-13. So I asked the vice president whether or not El Salvador has any evidence that he's part of MS-13 or has committed a crime. Yeah. So I asked the vice president if Abrego Garcia has not committed a crime, and the U.S. courts have found that he was illegally taken from the United States, and the government of El Salvador has no evidence that he was part of MS-13. Why is El Salvador continuing to hold him in CECOT? And his answer was that the Trump administration is paying El Salvador, the government of El Salvador, to keep him at CECOT. And I pointed out that neither the government of El Salvador nor the Trump administration has presented evidence to support the claim that he's committed any kind of criminal acts. And so why not release Abrego Garcia today? And he said what President Bukele said the other day at the White House, which that El Salvador can't smuggle Mr. Abrego Garcia into the United States. And I said, I'm not asking him to smuggle Mr. Abrego Garcia into the United States. I'm simply asking him to open the door of CECOT and let this innocent man walk out. And I pointed out that the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, has said that the United States would send a plane to El Salvador to pick them up. And why did she do that? Because the Supreme Court of the United States, in a ruling of 9-0, has said that the Trump administration has to facilitate his return to the United States.
All right, so you get their talking points. At no point does he admit that this guy is an El Salvador citizen, that he is in the country illegally. He has no business being in Maryland. He has no legal right to be in Maryland. No, I don't want you to smuggle in a terrorist. I want you to want to send a plane at your taxpayer expense to go pick him up and bring him through the front door. That's your stance. Brilliant. Yeah, the Trump administration hasn't presented any evidence that he's been convicted of a crime. No, but you can go look up the records yourself. 28 people have already sent me on Twitter links to, hey, here's his court filings from 2019 from both the original court case and the appeals court that both said that they agree with all the evidence that's on the table from informants and tattoos and whatever else, that he is a member of MS-13 and he has committed these crimes, some domestic violence issues. He's tied to some human trafficking issues. Of course, it's already illegal to cross our border and live here for 14 years illegally to begin with, but then also a couple of restraining orders from the girlfriend that he keeps beating. Yeah, the evidence is out there. You just don't want to see it, Chris. You just don't want to. You act like, well, they haven't shown me any evidence. Well, go look it up. Donald Trump's not going to run around with like a Shoney's placemat with all the bullet points on this guy's criminal record. You're going to have to do a little bit of homework yourself, or you can just follow me on Twitter. I've retweeted this stuff, or go follow Sarah, who we need to have Sarah Fields on. That's your reminder, Garrett. Let's try her again. Yeah, it's out there. We've seen the records, or those of us who have looked for, 30 seconds on Twitter have seen the records. Coming up next, though, another anomaly in the current political culture. How is it that AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Jasmine Crockett have become the head of the Democrat movement? Now, they don't have it in title, but they're the titular head of the Democrat movement. They're the most popular candidates going on right now. How is this that they are the front runners for 2028? The liberal whisperer Evan Sayet is going to explain it beautifully next on The James Show. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. One of my favorite guests, the great Evan Sayet, is on The James Show. And this is a guy, the creator of the unified field theory of liberalism, which I feel like is a cheat code. Because, Evan, so many of my friends and people who call and write into the James Show are befuddled on how AOC and Jasmine Crockett are the titular heads. They're the most popular Democrats on the scene right now. But that actually fits just in line with the expectations for people who are familiar with your theory.
No, indeed. And one of the things that I write about and speak about all the time is the fact that the Democrat Party never argues in the affirmative. They will never tell you what it is they believe, why it is they believe it, why it is good, how it works, where it has worked in the past. Instead, they will argue only and always in the negative about the alternative. And if you notice at their rallies, at their gatherings, at their protests, it's always about how evil Trump is. It's always about how evil Musk is. And by the way, this is not new. If you go back to my original lecture, I talked about how they were calling George Bush Hitler. They were calling Ronald Reagan Hitler. Their entire argument is that the alternative is so far beyond the pale that you have no choice but to support them. So you don't really need smart arguments to be a Democrat. And you don't need any arguments at all. In fact, they do not argue in the affirmative, because if nothing is better than anything else, they have nothing to affirm. And it's funny, I go back to what I consider the de facto anthem of, let's call it ultimately the woke movement, which is John Lennon's Imagine. And even in this song by a nice guy, a smart guy, a decent guy, but even in this anthem, he calls for the destruction of national sovereignties, no countries.
Yeah, not great countries, no countries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not let's now think through and make a comparison, side with the good ones and against the bad ones. No, eliminate all. And by the way, that's true of gun control. Let's not separate the good guys and let them have guns and the bad guys and take theirs away. It's indiscriminately taking it away from good and bad because they do not draw a distinction between the two. But in John Lennon's song, okay, once they have destroyed national sovereignties, no countries, and once they've destroyed all moral codes, no religions.
Not great religions, no religions.
That's correct. They make no comparison. And we see this in the Middle East, where you will actually see queers, quote unquote, protesting on behalf of the Palestinians because they simply cannot make a moral judgment about the evils of the Palestinian, the Islamist movement, even though they will kill queers. They will throw them off of buildings, but they will not factor that into their thinking. So once there is no moral codes, once there are no national sovereignties, once there's no longer any property rights, okay, now how does society function? Well, the best John Lennon can do is say, use your imagination, because they cannot offer anything in the affirmative. And when you go and see AOC and you go to see Bernie Sanders and you go to see the others, their entire argument is that the oligarchy is bad.
Oligarchy, okay, yeah.
But what are you going to replace it with? All right, now that you've eliminated what is your plan for what will be? And they have none because they cannot have any.
Right. Name a country out there of the socialist variety that doesn't have a small elite ruling class of oligarchs. And maybe we can have that conversation. But let's also, for people who are new to you and the book and the speech that he referred to, he gave in 2007. And he was sort of using the shield and deflecting the criticism of George W. Bush at the time, who was literally Hitler, and Rudy Giuliani, who at the time was literally Hitler, and the playbook still stands 100% to this day. So now, look, I'm well versed. I've been cycling the news through this for a couple decades now. I think the real candidate they should go with, if they weren't obsessed with the worldview that you so beautifully described, I think their best candidate would be someone like a Mark Cuban, or someone who's accomplished something or does have affirmative concrete plans. He's doing like the cost plus drugs company, and whether or not that turns out to be a success, he's at least trying real things, and he moves out of the theoretical into the practical. And why does he get just no attention from these people?
Well, specifically for what you just said, because when you are operating in the theoretical, you can promise utopia. When you're dealing with the real world, you're often choosing between the lesser of two evils, or, life is rarely the choice between perfectly good and perfectly evil, but it is very often the choice between the much, much better and the much, much worse. And so you have to weigh the costs and the benefits, but the political left doesn't weigh costs and benefits, because if nothing is better than anything else, then there are no meaningful costs, nor are there any meaningful consequences.
And you're going into the great quote that Rush Limbaugh said about that speech that I just referenced in 2007, where Rush Limbaugh made the point that indiscriminateness is a moral imperative. And once you can digest that, the rest of this, so much of this other stuff makes sense. But in 30 seconds here, because I'm about out of time for the show, if you had to call it right now, who the candidates are going to be in 2028, I would say AOC and Jasmine Crockett on the ticket. What would you say?
Well, if today were 2028, I think you've got the inside track. I think they've got the inside track. But things change rapidly. People come out of nowhere. Who thought Barack Obama was going to take the nomination from Hillary Clinton way back then? Let me show my age, but who the hell was Jimmy Carter to come along? So things change. It is so much, much, much too early.
Who was Bill Clinton even? All good points. Evan, I'm just out of time. Listen, if you want his video, email me, james@wbap.com, or send me a Facebook message, and I'll send you the link. It's one of these permanent things. I'll send you that. And I'll send you the Henry Hazlitt Economics in One Lesson, too. All right, thank you very much. That's the great Evan Sayet. I'm out of time for the James Show. Stick around. Mark Levin's coming up next. If you need more James, I'm about to go put up the podcast. Find it wherever you already listen to podcasts, WBAP.com, the WBAP app. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.